Now, just a little warning before we begin, there will be some major spoilers in this video for the 10th and 11th episodes of Season 3 of The Bad Batch, so if you haven't seen them yet and you don't want anything ruined, it is a really good time to click away. Alright, so as just mentioned, we did indeed get 2 episodes this week, but unlike what is usually the case when we get 2 in a week, that being it's usually a sort of 2-part episode, or they are directly connected to one another like a mini story arc, that wasn't so much the case this time. These 2 episodes were, sure, they were connected to a degree, obviously, but not as much as usual when we get 2 at a time. And I feel like the main reason why we got 2 was because the first one, or the 10th episode overall, it didn't have a whole lot going on at face value, which isn't to say it wasn't a great episode, it very much was, just that it was very reminiscent of the first episode of the season. It was a much slower paced, very deliberate tone setter of an episode. It certainly tried to convey, and I think it succeeded, that things are about to get very dark in the final few episodes of the series. We are not setting up for a happily ever after ending for all members of the Bad Batch. Though speaking of the Bad Batch, the team itself, we didn't see them at all in that first episode, and I couldn't help but be reminded of something I used to sort of joke about in the previous 2 seasons, that oftentimes the best episodes are the ones that don't actually have the Bad Batch in them. Though that hasn't exactly been the case this 3rd season. Pretty much every episode has, at the very least, been good, if not excellent, even when featuring the team itself. But anyway, the first of the episodes, the one called Identity Crisis, is again mainly setting the tone and letting us know just how evil the Empire truly is. There is some and/or levels of cruelty in here as we see Force-sensitive kids being locked up in the vault, as they called it on Tantus. Kids that just want to go home. But we know, short of them being rescued at some point, which is possible, that they're never going home. That's never going to happen. That the best they could sort of hope for is to become an Inquisitor, even though that's a terrible and arguably worse fate in some ways, though it will offer them some freedom, I suppose. They won't die locked up in a cage, so that's a win, I think. Anyway, along with this, we also got quite a bit of exposition dropped on us that I don't know if we learned anything from exactly that we didn't already suspect or that hadn't been heavily alluded to or implied anyway, but it certainly confirmed a few things, like the fact that no, you can't just clone or reproduce blood with a high level of midi-chlorians in it. If, for example, you clone Palpatine, who obviously has a high midi-chlorian count, or so I think we can assume, that doesn't mean the clone will also have his or a high M count in general. This we kind of know from everything we've learned about Palpatine coming back in the sequels, that many failed clones were created in an effort to make him a new host body for that return, one of which ended up being Rey's father, Dathan. We also had it confirmed here that, yup, Omega is so important to the Empire, or to the Project, because her cloned blood is able to accept an M-count transfer. Basically, you can inject blood with a high midi-chlorian count into her blood, and it'll turn her blood into a high midi-chlorian count blood, at least that's how I interpreted it. Meaning that it's possible, if not kind of likely, that at some point Omega herself could be injected with high midi-chlorian count blood and become Force sensitive. Most of the rest of this episode is then, well, a sort of identity crisis for Emery, who has been promoted to the position of chief scientist after the imprisonment of Nala Se, who she visits at one point and kind of tells her, so how are you liking the job with the kids? Either way, Emery gets told all that information by Hemlock about Project Necromancer that I just went over a few moments ago, and is then taken to the aforementioned vault, where it quickly becomes apparent she's not exactly the biggest fan of keeping kids locked up and experimenting on them. And I'd have to imagine she can sort of empathize with these kids, given she is also basically an experiment herself and has been locked up her whole life as well, though not quite the same way or to the same extreme. And certainly her time spent with Omega, who'd had a freedom she has never known, and no doubt Omega talked about her time being free with her brothers. Certainly all of that has influenced or left an impact on her. We even see Emery give Omega's old doll to one of the locked up kids, which I thought was a nice little moment. This episode did a great job of making you feel for those kids and getting you to both understand and like Emery. And almost without question, I think Emery will play some sort of a role in Omega's eventual escape, but more on all that later. Another thing I thought this episode did really, really well, a great job of actually, was how it used Cad Bane. Because no, he didn't have to be featured to be effective here. We didn't have to have him front and center the whole episode, getting all the attention and fighting the Bad Batch and having that be the whole episode. Instead, it was a reminder that, yep, he's still out there, he's still arguably the greatest bounty hunter of this time, and that Force-sensitive kids are very much in danger as the Empire hunts them down, or as Bane hunts them down for the Empire. And all of this continues to lead me to believe that they've kind of subtly been setting up the next animated series right under our nose with a lot of these little hints and clues. And I think that show could be about the Path and feature Omega, Ventress, and maybe even Quinlan Vos, who we know is associated with the Path thanks to the Kenobi series. It just seems like all the pieces for that are kind of falling into place, and who knows, something like that could even potentially link up with things we've seen or will see in the Jedi series of games and Cal Kestis. There's a lot of potential there, I think, even though I'd almost imagine you'd want to do an animated show in the Mandoverse time period instead of another one between episodes 3 and 4, but who knows, only time will tell what is coming next. Also in this episode, when Tarkin contacts Hemlock and tells him he's spending a bit too much money on his projects, we learn there's another phase of Clone X troopers. We get a glimpse of that during that scene when Hemlock switches from one screen to the next and we see a more, I guess, upgraded version of the Clone X armor. He also gets in contact with Clone X at this time, the current one. There's been a few of them at this point. But Hemlock mentions how the other operatives aren't ready to join him in the field just yet. And I'm assuming he means the upgraded version of Clone X's, that they're not ready, that they probably still need Omega to make them work. Either way, Hemlock wants an update on the pursuit of Omega, and this is when Clone X tells us he's pulled some information from the Trandoshan about Phee, and obviously that Trandoshan is Sid, and by the fact that he has to pull information from her, it seems she didn't give it up willingly, so at least there's that. Maybe she feels some guilt over betraying them and wants to make amends, who knows? It could be that we'll see her again before the season is over, and she will again make amends or redeem herself in a way by helping the Bad Batch locate Tantus and then launch their rescue mission of Omega. Alright, and speaking of Omega being taken again, let's move on to the next episode, the 11th episode, the one called Point of No Return, which was certainly a lot more action-packed. I'd say it was equally as good as the first one though, but in a few different ways, though both did do a nice job of showing the brutality of the Empire. And so this one starts with Clone X having tracked down Phee's ship, sneaking on board it, and then getting the location of Pabu, all without Phee being the wiser. We then see or learn that, coincidentally enough, Hunter has decided that they've stayed on Pabu long enough and they're putting everyone in danger, and that it's time to pack up and leave, which means Wrecker gets to load the ship. And this is all happening as Clone X shows up, spots them eventually after doing some scouting, and confirms that, yes, Omega is with them, and then he goes on to blow up the Marauder, almost killing Wrecker in the process, though Wrecker manages to heroically save Gonki as well. And I just almost thought they might kill Wrecker here. It would have arguably been the perfect way to do it, to kill him so kind of randomly, because it would have come out of absolutely nowhere and been so meaningless and shocking to see him go out that way. It would have been the total opposite of Tech's death, that, albeit emotionally impactful, but it was kind of, or sort of telegraphed or expected and built up to be this very huge and dramatic moment, which, yeah, was great, it works well, but this would have been the total opposite of that, and it would have hit us totally differently. And along with this, we did get a reminder of Tech's death shortly before this incident with Wrecker, when we see Omega is going to leave his goggles behind because this was the first place that was like a real home to them. It also, I think, adds to the guilt that Omega and the others no doubt have to feel later on, that they did make this place their home, despite knowing the danger it would bring to the people of Pabu. And now these people that showed them nothing but kindness, that welcomed them with open arms, are paying the price for that kindness when the Empire shows up in full force, which of course happens shortly after the destruction of the Marauder. Though speaking of Tech's death, if there was any chance that Clone X was Tech, which has been a theory floating around out there, though one I've never really thought was going to turn out to be the case, it really feels like this episode would have been the perfect time and place to reveal that, or to heavily hint at it or imply it at the very least. What with Omega's little tribute to him and the fact that Tech would have been returning home in a way. They could have had it where Clone X perhaps finds the goggles that Omega left behind, and then he looks at them for a long moment before crushing them or something along those lines. And the fact that they didn't do something like that, I think, says that, no, this isn't going to be Tech. Thankfully, he will stay dead, and death will mean something in this show. Though Clone X could still be Cody, that would work, I guess. Or, you know, it could just be a random, brand new character, or a brand new clone we've never seen before. Not everyone or everything has to be something or someone from before. Just like poor Marok, they're just a bad guy in the story, and eventually they will probably perish. Anyway, yes, Clone X is the one leading the attack, or the search of Pabu for Omega, and he has ordered all means of escape, like the ships in port that they are using for fishing. He's ordered them to be destroyed. He has destroyed the livelihood of the people, all of which, as kind of mentioned before, it makes Omega feel extremely guilty, like this is her fault, though Hunter does try to comfort her by saying this is the Empire's fault, which is true, but I don't think that makes her feel all that much better in the moment. Crosshair then comes up with a plan to steal a ship and contact Echo and to escape, which Hunter says he'll do. He'll steal the ship while Omega and Crosshair make their way to Wrecker and wait. Hunter almost pulls it off until Clone X just shoots the pilot of the ship and it crashes into the ocean. And for a brief moment I wondered would they kill Hunter, but no, he is fine and he eventually makes his way to shore. Out of options then, and partly to spare the people of Pabu, and part to find Tantus, which they've been unable to locate thus far, Omega suggests to Crosshair turning herself in, which Crosshair immediately does not like and says that they should stick to the plan. It then takes a little bit of convincing, but eventually Crosshair decides to go along with this plan, and figures he can shoot a tracker onto the ship that they take her away on as they are taking her away. Which might sound, yeah, a little crazy or just plain stupid, or like he'd never go along with that idea, especially because he knows what is in store for her at Tantus. They were there together, of course. But honestly, I don't think he knows what else to do or say. Let's keep in mind that Crosshair has followed orders and stuck to the plan and always tried to accomplish the mission his whole life. He's never had to make any sort of fatherly decision, you could say. And he knows, as Omega points out to him, that there is indeed a bigger mission here. She does know how to sort of speak the language that makes the most sense to him, as, again, someone who has been nothing but a soldier his whole life. Still, I think you maybe wanted to have Omega have to do a bit more convincing before Crosshair agreed to the plan, to have him show maybe a little bit more emotion than he did, though at the same time, you don't want the scene to drag on forever, and there will certainly be more sad goodbyes to come before this series is over. But anyway, moving on, what I was 99.9% sure would happen next is that yes, Omega would turn herself in, they would find the tracker she was trying to hide, and then they'd take her to the ship, and as it is flying away, Crosshair would have one shot to hit it with the tracker, but his hand would start shaking. He'd then have to calm himself down, and just in the nick of time, he would fire and make the shot, and we'd have a way to find and eventually rescue Omega. But instead, he just missed the shot, or was a second too late, actually, and I was not expecting that. But I have to say, what a perfect way to end the episode, to do the unexpected, to subvert your expectations. What a perfect way to build excitement and tension for these final few episodes, as we have to wonder how in the world are they going to find Tantus now? And how is Hunter going to feel after he learns Crosshair went along with Omega's plan to turn herself in? And something else I have to mention here that was also perfect was the score. Kevin Kiner has once again absolutely nailed it and delivered in both of these episodes. And along with this, I gotta say that they looked incredible as well. The animation has come such a long way from that Clone Wars movie 15 years ago, and I hope we have many, many more shows to come that use this style and that continue to perfect it. And so, to wrap it up here, 2 excellent episodes that did everything they needed to do to set up the end of the series. We set the dark tone with the first episode, learned or had it confirmed what exactly Project Necromancer is, and gave our heroes a possible ally on the inside with Emery. While the second episode, though it certainly wasn't the first time this had happened, but it saw Omega taken by the Empire, though this time after she made the hard, selfish choice to give herself up for others. And though almost without question Omega will be rescued and survive the show, the real question is, what price will the others have to pay to see that happen? Which members of the Bad Batch aren't making it out of this show alive? Well, that's all I got for you this time. Now it is your turn to take to the comments below and tell me what you thought of these 2 episodes of The Bad Batch. Did you love them? Did you hate them? Are you somewhere in between? And are you excited to see how this will all end in the next couple weeks? Whatever the case may be, leave those comments below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.